The part I keep coming back to, the part that still gets me when I'm lying in bed at 3 in the morning, isn't the moment she realized what I'd done. It's not the look on her face, or the phone call she made afterward, or even the check she tried to hand me that I wouldn't take. The part I keep coming back to is my daughter Iris sitting in the passenger seat of my truck on the way home, eating a gas station granola bar and saying, "Daddy, did you fix it?" And I said, "Yeah, baby, I fixed it." And she said, "Good, because you always fix everything." She's 7. She doesn't know what that job cost me in sleep, in pride, in patience. She just knows her dad shows up. That's the whole story, really. But let me back up. My name is Ben Kowalczyk. I'm 38 years old. I'm an electrician. Not the kind who works for a big contractor with a company truck and a benefits package. I mean a one-man operation out of a utility van I bought used in 2019, a box of business cards I printed at Staples, and a phone number that goes straight to my cell. I do residential work mostly, panel upgrades, rewiring old houses, installing ceiling fans for people who call me 3 times to confirm the appointment and then hover while I work. I live in a 2-bedroom rental in Knoxville, Tennessee, with my daughter Iris, who is 7, and a beagle named Chunk who sleeps under my feet every night and has eaten 3 of my phone chargers. I've been raising Iris on my own since she was 3. Her mom and I, we weren't married. We tried for a while, and then we didn't, and then she moved to Phoenix to be near her family, and Iris stayed with me because that's what Iris wanted, and honestly that's what I wanted too. It's just us. It's always been just us, and I won't pretend that's easy, but I also won't pretend it's a tragedy. Because it isn't. Iris is the funniest person I know. She has opinions about everything. About which gas stations have the best hot dogs, about why beagles are superior to all other dogs, about why I should grow a mustache. She's 7, and she is absolutely certain of everything. I love her more than I've ever loved anything. The money is fine. We're not comfortable, not really, but we're okay. I make enough to keep the lights on and pay for Iris's after-school program and put a little away each month. I'm not going backwards. But I'm not getting ahead either, and some months, like when the van needs brakes or Iris has a field trip and needs new shoes, and the insurance premium comes due all at once. Some months I'm moving money around and hoping nothing else goes sideways. That's the context. That's who I was when I got the call. It was a Tuesday in March, middle of the afternoon. I'd just finished a job in Sequoia Hills. That's the nice part of Knoxville, the old money neighborhood, big houses up near the river, and I was loading my tools when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did. The woman on the other end had one of those voices that sounds like it's used to being listened to. Not rude, exactly, but efficient. She introduced herself as Patricia Halcomb. Said she'd gotten my number from a referral. Said she had an electrical issue at her home and she needed someone who could come take a look that day if possible. I asked her what kind of issue. She said, "The kind that 3 other electricians have looked at and couldn't figure out." I said I could be there in 20 minutes. The address she gave me was also in Sequoia Hills, but deeper in, further up the hill, past the part of the neighborhood I'd just been working in. I knew when I turned onto her street that this was different. The houses up here aren't the kind of houses that have for sale signs in front of them. They're the kind of houses that get passed down, or get quietly sold through a realtor who already knows the buyer. Stone gates, long driveways, trees that are older than anyone who lives there. Her driveway was a 1/4 mile long. I'm not exaggerating. I drove my van up it and felt vaguely like I was arriving somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. The house at the end was the kind of house that real estate listings describe as a private estate. It looked like it had been built in the 1920s and then maintained by people who took that responsibility seriously. Copper gutters, a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides, landscaping that was clearly done by professionals who came more than once a year. I parked and sat in my van for a moment and told myself to act normal. Patricia Halcomb met me at the door herself. No housekeeper, no assistant. She was probably 55, maybe 60, with silver hair cut short and the kind of posture you can't fake. She was wearing a dark blazer and slacks, even though it was Tuesday afternoon and she was home. She shook my hand and looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Thank you for coming quickly." She walked me through the problem. One wing of the house, the guest wing on the east side, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, had lost power intermittently for the last 6 weeks. Not fully. Not in a way that tripped a breaker, just brownouts, lights dimming, outlets dropping to nothing for a few seconds and then coming back, the HVAC in that wing cycling on and off irregularly. The other electricians, she'd had 3 come out, 2 from large companies and 1 independent, had all run the same diagnostics, checked the panel, tested the circuits, found nothing definitive. 2 of them had recommended full rewiring of the wing, which would have meant tearing into walls. The estimates were between $9,000 and $14,000. One of them had told her it might be a ghost load from old knob and tube somewhere in the walls and had essentially shrugged. She said this all very calmly, no frustration in her voice. Just information, delivered clearly. I asked her to take me to the panel first. It was a newer panel, a square D, 200 amp service. Looked like it had been installed maybe 10 years ago. Everything was labeled. The work was clean. I stood there and looked at it for a while and didn't say anything. She stood behind me and waited. She didn't fill the silence with questions, which I noticed. Most people can't sit. She could. I started asking her questions. Not about the electrical panel. About the house. When was the wing built relative to the main house? Had anything been added or renovated in the last 5 years? Any work done on the property, landscaping, irrigation, anything that might have involved digging? Had the issue started suddenly or gradually? She answered everything precisely. The wing was an addition from 1987. No recent renovations. Landscape crew had put in a new drainage system along the east side of the property the previous fall. September, she said, and then she paused and said, about 2 weeks before the issue started. There it was. I went outside. I walked the east side of the house along the foundation, looking at where the drainage work had been done. New stone edging, fresh mulch, a French drain running parallel to the house about 4 feet out from the foundation. Good work, mostly. But there was a section near the corner, right at the junction where the addition met the original house, where the ground had settled slightly. A small dip. Not dramatic, but enough. I went back inside and asked her where the conduit ran for the east wing feed. She didn't know. Why would she? But she took me to the basement and we found it. PVC conduit running along the foundation wall, and at the corner, right where the ground had settled outside, there was the faintest hairline crack in the conduit. Nothing that would show up on a standard circuit test. Nothing that would trip a breaker. But enough, just enough, that when ground moisture was high, when it rained or when the irrigation ran, trace moisture was wicking into that conduit and creating intermittent resistance in the feed line. Not a wiring problem, not a panel problem. A compromised conduit section about 18 inches long, with a $2 coupler that had worked itself loose in the ground settlement. The fix was a conduit repair coupling. A $9 part, and 2 hours of work to access the section, dry it out properly, seal it, and repack the ground correctly. I stood in her basement and told her this. I told her everything I'd found, everything I'd reasoned through, what I was going to do and why. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "The gentleman from Premier Electric told me it would require full wall demolition." I said I knew. She said, "He charged me $800 to tell me that." I told her I was sorry to hear it. She looked at me for another long moment. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She said, "I'll tell you what. If you're right, I'll pay you double your rate. And I'll refer you to every person I know in this neighborhood, and I know everyone in this neighborhood." She paused, "But I've been given bad information by confident men 3 times already. So I want you to be sure." I said, "Mrs. Halcombe, I'm sure." And she said, "Then get started." I called Iris's after-school program and arranged a late pickup. Went to the supply house on Western Avenue and got what I needed. Came back and did the work. It was tight, getting down to that conduit section. I had to move some of the drainage stone and dig carefully so I didn't disturb the new French drain. But the repair itself was straightforward once I had access. New coupling, proper sealing compound, repack the ground, test the circuit. When I tested it, everything came up solid. All 3 bedrooms, both bathrooms, the HVAC. I ran it through a load test, turned everything in the wing on simultaneously, and it didn't budge. I found her in her study. She was on the phone, and she held up one finger when she saw me and finished her call. Then she set the phone down and looked at me. I said, "It's fixed." She said, "All of it?" I said, "All of it." She nodded slowly, like she was processing something. Then she said, "Show me." We walked through the east wing together. I flipped every switch, tested every outlet with the meter I still had on my belt. She watched all of it without saying a word. At the end of the hall, she stood for a moment with her hand on the wall switch, lights blazing, and then she turned to me and said, "How?" I told her again, more slowly, this time. The drainage work, the ground settlement, the conduit crack, the moisture infiltration, the intermittent resistance that only showed up under certain conditions, after rain, after the irrigation system ran. She said none of the others even asked about the landscaping work. I said I'd noticed that. She looked at me, and then she said something that I have thought about a lot since then. She said, "You didn't bring the most expensive equipment. You asked the right questions." I told her that was pretty much the job. She went to her desk. She wrote me a check. I'd told her my rate before I started. I charged $95 an hour for diagnostic and repair work, and she wrote the check for double that, plus materials, plus what I'll describe as a significant additional amount that I did not expect and did not ask for. When I looked at the check, she said, "You saved me $11,000 at minimum, probably more if they'd torn into the walls and found nothing." She said, "That's not generosity, that's math." I said I appreciated it, which felt inadequate. She said, "I'll be making some calls." She made some calls. In the 4 months after that Tuesday afternoon, I got 14 new clients in that neighborhood and the ones adjacent to it. Not all big jobs, but steady work, the kind of work that has a way of generating more work. I hired a part-time helper, a kid named Spencer who'd just finished trade school and needed hours, and I bought a better van. I started an LLC. I got an accountant for the first time in my adult life, an actual accountant who told me several things I should have been doing for years that I hadn't been doing. I'm not going to stand here and tell you Patricia Holcomb changed my life with a check. That's not the story. The story is that I showed up to a problem that 4 other people had looked at and given up on, and I found the answer because I asked about the landscaping. That's it. That's the whole thing. The work I'd been doing for 14 years. The part where you slow down and think before you start pulling wire. That's what she paid for. Knowledge is the job. The parts are just parts. But here's the part I keep coming back to. About 3 weeks after I finished her job, she called me again, not with new work. She just called to follow up, which nobody does, and which caught me completely off guard. We talked for a few minutes, and she asked about Iris, because I'd mentioned Iris when I called to arrange the late pickup that day, that one small detail I'd let slip. She asked how old she was. I told her 7. She asked what she was into. I said, "Right now? Drawing. She draws all the time. Everything." A few days later, a package arrived at my house. It was a set of professional-grade colored pencils, the real kind, the ones that cost actual money, and a sketchbook with heavy paper. There was a handwritten note that said, "For the girl who has a dad who asks the right questions, keep drawing." Iris still has those pencils. She uses them every single day. She showed them to me the afternoon they arrived, holding the tin open so carefully, like she was holding something fragile. She looked up at me and said, "Who sent these?" I said, "A woman whose house I fixed." She said, "She knows I like drawing?" I said, "I mentioned it." She looked back at the pencils and then back at me and said, "Daddy, you always know what to say about me." I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with a 7-year-old who trusts you that completely, who assumes without question that you are out there in the world representing her correctly, telling her story right, making sure people know she exists and that she matters. I don't know how to deserve that. But I'm going to keep trying to. The work is still the same. I still drive the same streets, still crawl into the same basements and attics, still deal with the same panel boxes, and the same conduit and the same customers who hover and ask questions I've already answered. But something settled in me after that job. Not confidence. I've always had enough of that. Something quieter. The knowledge that the thing I've been doing all these years, the slow, careful, ask the right questions approach that doesn't always make me the fastest or the cheapest option, that thing is the right thing. It's the thing that makes the difference between an $11,000 wall demolition and a $9 conduit coupler. Knowledge is the job. The parts are just parts. My dad told me that when I was 19 and he was teaching me how to trace a circuit. I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. Iris drew a picture that week. She does this sometimes, makes drawings for no reason she'll explain, just hands them to me. This one was two figures, one tall and one small, standing in front of what appeared to be a house with the lights on. The tall one was holding a toolbox. The small one was holding what I think was a dog, though Chunk came out looking more like a potato with legs. Underneath she'd written, in her uneven 7-year-old handwriting, "My dad fixes things." That's on my refrigerator right now, right next to the grocery list and Iris's school photo and a permission slip I keep forgetting to sign. That drawing is why I do this.